Hello, my wonderful little souls, trapped in the demon portal. Do I have any fans of cats here? The fluffy little cretins that like to spend their time being bipolar with us. We all love them, I'm sure. But I'm thinking today's story, My Cat Is Not My Cat, by Cecily, 1987, might just change that opinion. So sit back, grip your seats, and prepare to enjoy. Jet took his place atop my Xbox like he always did. I thought I had broken him of this in the past. His fluffy, fat body would clog the cooling vents, making my Xbox overheat and shut off. But he stood atop the struggling console, staring back at me with his unblinking feline gaze. Any other time, this would just be slightly annoying. But I had a growing suspicion this cat was not my cat. A lot of people will say I'm just being paranoid. All cats act this way. They all have a screw loose. But they don't know my Jet. I found Jet 4 years ago at the city park. He and his brother had been abandoned. 2 little kittens mewing and shivering in the cold. Of course, I couldn't have this. With my mother's permission, I brought both of them back to the house. I had just gotten out of an ugly divorce and was living with my mother until I got back on my feet. I knew my mother had a soft spot for all things fluffy, so it wasn't a big deal to adopt them. She was newly widowed, so we both welcomed more companionship. Jet was pure black and his brother Spike was a gray tabby. They were named after anime characters by my nerd self. My mom just went with it or was unaware of it. Spike, like his namesake, was rambunctious and always getting into trouble. Jet, though, was always timid and preferred to let his brother explore the world for him. They both grew to be rather large cats, Jet bigger than his brother, which made it all the more comical that Jet was the wimp of the two. I lived with my mother for another 1.5 years. At first, Spike was my favorite. His curious nature and friendly personality made it impossible not to like him. Jet was the opposite. For 3 months, after bringing him home, he would, without fail, freak out and run from me every time I came back from work. He would hide underneath the couch and stare at me like I was a complete stranger. I finally broke him of his annoying behavior. I would fish him out and make him cuddle with me every time he had his freak out and fled from me. Something must have finally flipped in his head and he realized I wasn't going to cook and eat him. But instead of just acting normal around me, he decided to go full clinger and stand me. Everywhere I went, he had to be with me. Going to the restroom would cause him to meow non-stop while bumping himself against the door. Everywhere I sat required his presence to keep me held down. And his fat self was addicted to cat treats, meowing incessantly every time I walked by the kitchen. Long story short, when I moved out to live on my own again, he had to come. Mom believed he would have a nervous breakdown from separation anxiety if I left him. He was my fluffy, needy, tiny panther roommate. My apartment was relatively big for just me and Jet. I went for a 2-bedroom when all I needed was 1. But if I was going to be living alone again at 30, I wouldn't live all cramped up like I did in my 20s. So the extra room was an office, yoga, cat jungle gym room. I splurged on the multi-layered cat tree even though he barely was on it. He was always on me. But he was strictly an inside cat and I left him alone a lot when I was at work. So I like to believe he used it when I was gone. I had gotten a 9-to-5 job, getting paid pretty well as a receptionist at a high-end medical clinic. I was beginning to enjoy my financial stability, my new car, being single, and basking in the light at the end of the divorce tunnel. Jet, Netflix, and Xbox was the only thing I needed at the time. But then something terrible happened. I came home from work to find my apartment door wide open. My neighbor from across the hall was standing by her door waiting on me. She was holding her shivering dog in her arms, a Shih Tzu, I believe. "Oh, Glory, I'm so glad you're back," she exclaimed dramatically as she swooshed around in her robes to face me, her multiple bracelets and necklaces clattering. Dear girl, someone broke into our apartments. I dropped my purse by the doorstep and looked inside. A little dumbstruck on how to proceed. Good thing my neighbor continued her story after her purposeful dramatic pause. I called the cops already, dear. They have already been by. They told me you can contact them if you find anything missing. I turned to her, Ella I think her name was, and asked, how long ago was this? About an hour and a half. The cops left about 30 minutes ago. They left me with a card with the lead officer's information. I walked in and began looking around. I waved for Ella to follow. She continued, I was laying down from a headache, waiting for Max to return from work. Usually I'm at the church for choir practice and Max doesn't get home until after you. But I heard the door begin to rattle like somebody was using keys on it. Ella was now in my living room while I did a quick search down the hallway. I hadn't noticed anything missing. Everything seemed to be the cluttered mess I had left it. I realized Ella had stopped with her story. I rolled my eyes and returned to the living room to give her my apt attention. As if on cue, she continued. So I put my ear to the wall and listened. Ella pantomimed, putting her ears against the back of her hand. I knew my Frank wouldn't be coming home this early, and I knew he never carried around so many keys. Then Little Bit started barking. Her eyes widened dramatically as she began petting her dog like it needed consoling. Little Bit never barks at his daddy like that. Her dog just stared at me and shivered. In my experience with the neighbor dog, he barked at anything and everything. He barked at night, he barked during the day, he barked every time I walked down the hallway. But maybe his bark was different this time. Maybe that's what Ella was trying to express. Different than its normal insistent yapping. I could see Ella was performing another dramatic pause, waiting for me to contribute. He sounded different, like scared? I offered. Yes, she jumped. So I grabbed my .45 and racked the slide. Ella moved her robe aside to show me a large silver handgun sticking out of her pajama pants. This time my eyes widened. Oh Lord, Ella was packing. I said, who's there? And I heard the door slam and the keys start jingling away. Lil Bit was barking furiously, so I scooped up Bit and opened the door. She performed another pause. Nobody there. But your door was wide open. I felt so confused and a little violated. I just turned circles in my living room trying to see if my brain noticed anything out of place. Wait, where was Jet? So I called the cops. They did go in your apartment to see if anybody was hiding in there, and they contacted the landlady Rachel to see if any staff had permission to go into the rooms today. Jet. Oh no, Jet! I darted to my couch and looked under it. Nothing. I frantically called his name again as I ran to my room to check under my bed. He wasn't anywhere. There wasn't a lot of places for him to hide either. I ran back into the hallway in a panic. Oh honey, I forgot about your cat, Ella exclaimed. She began looking around her immediate area like Jet could be hiding right under her feet. I felt like I was going to hyperventilate. Who would want to steal my cat? No, that idea didn't make any sense. Nobody was stealing cats, somebody just broke in and Jet ran away like the big wuss he was. But usually he just hid up under my bed when frightened. Why did he run out? I felt tears begin to well in my eyes. It was just too much. The violation of my privacy, the thought of a stranger digging through the few of my remaining belongings. Now my cat was missing, either stolen or running scared around the neighborhood. He must be so scared. Before I realized it, Ella was at my side comforting me. She must have seen my breakdown incoming. She led me to sit on the couch as I began to sniffle. I never saw your cat escape, but I wasn't watching the door the whole time. I walked away to get my phone and talk with the cops. We sat and talked for a while. She helped me calm down and come up with a game plan. She let me hold her dog as consolation. That's when I realized I liked my new neighbor. "It's Laurie, by the way," I said during a lull in the conversation. Ella looked at me questioningly, then embarrassment covered her face. "Oh my God, dear, I've been calling you the wrong name all this time." I smiled and laughed. "It's okay. It was never a big deal, so I didn't want to embarrass you. Besides, I kind of thought it was cute," I replied. Ella laughed and said, "I had a sister named Gloria and I'm getting old. Just answer to both of them for my sake, please." I handed Ella back her dog and gave her a quick hug. "I'll answer to anything that sounds close. Now, I need to search the neighborhood like we talked about. Jet could still be around." After I said goodbye to Ella, I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. It was already close to 8 p.m. I was on the 3rd floor of the complex, but the hallways were open to the outside with stairways leading straight to the parking lot, with no walls to separate the outside from the inside. Cool air blew through the hallways and my feet echoed off the cement floor. I made it to the ground floor and called for Jet, looking under and in between parked cars for a black cat hiding in the dark. I had been at it for about half an hour when I noticed a maintenance van idling towards the back of the building. I heard the jingle of keys as 2 maintenance men came down the stairs carrying something. 2 more apartments after this. Mistress is making quick progress. More than half already. The conversation stopped as both men saw me. They were carrying a rolled-up carpet between them, but something heavy was clearly weighing it down, slumped in the middle. Both men were gigantic, at least 7 foot and over 250 pounds. They both were sweating profusely, their tan uniforms darkened by sweat. What shocked me the most is they both looked the same. Twins? It had to be. The only difference between them was one man had a fresh scratch going down his left eye, swelling it shut. "Ma'am?" one said as they hurried past me with their heads turned down. I should have asked if they had seen Jet, but something told me not to. They loaded the carpet into the van, all the while throwing quick glances at me. Of course, my mind went to the morbid. It looked like they were sneaking out a body wrapped in a carpet. But how cliché could you be? Maybe I've been watching too much Criminal Minds. I retired back to my room shortly after. The whole thing had drained me physically and mentally. Sadness crept in as my head hit the pillow. My poor little guy was all alone out there. I would put up posters tomorrow. A somber sleep overtook me. The next day at work, I printed out flyers with Jet's face plastered all over them. When I got home, I ate a Lunchable and took a quick shower. I figured I would be out for a couple of hours, hanging up flyers and questioning the neighbors, and I needed to be refreshed for the task ahead. I had my stack of flyers and was grabbing my keys from the counter to head out when I heard a soft knock at the door. When I answered it, I was met by the landlady, Rachel. Rachel was middle-aged, tall, and pale-skinned. Her dark hair pulled back into a tight knot. She had a toothy smile plastered across her face that didn't show in her eyes. The sight of her was uncomfortable as she stood over me. When I opened the door inward, she didn't step back to give me personal space. She stood just inches away from me on the other side of the doorframe. An overwhelming scent of cheap perfume assaulted me. She must have dumped half a bottle on herself. Rachel blinked twice, then addressed me. "Good evening, treasured tenant. I heard you were missing a cat?" Her awkward smile still across her face. Yeah, how did you know?" Rachel produced a pet carrier from behind her back and presented it to me. I actually had to step back to not be hit by it. I bent over to look into the dark inside. I saw 2 green feline eyes staring back at me. I quickly fumbled with the cage to let him out. I picked up his fat girth to hold him out in front of me. There are a lot of fat black cats out there, but this one was definitely my Jet. When he was a kitten, he got out of the house back at my mom's. He was gone for 3 days before he returned scared and dirty. He also had a cut on his upper lip that turned into a scar. It made it look like he was giving a humorless smirk. This was one of the reasons he was an inside cat and was traumatized of going outdoors. "Oh, Jet, it is you," I said as I hugged him. He also smelled funny, like chemicals. Something strong and pungent. No telling what he got into out there. I would have to wipe him down with a whole box of wet wipes. But as long as I have him back, I don't care how he smells. "How did you know he was missing? I don't think you've ever met him before," I asked. Rachel blinked rapidly and froze as the smile fell from her face. She reminded me of an old computer trying to load a heavy program. Her eyes darted around my apartment to finally land on the stack of papers in my hands. "I saw the flyers," she said, my brow furrowed in confusion. "Are you sure you just didn't hear it from Ella?" I offered. "Yes," Rachel replied curtly and nodded. She turned quickly and walked away from me without a further word. "Okay, bye I guess," I said to myself as I watched her go. I closed my door and returned to cuddling my cat. He was quiet and uninterested in me for the rest of the night. I figured he was shaken up. He usually was very talkative. I would say something to him and he would meow back 9 times out of 10. But he wouldn't even sit on me. He just sat on the other side of the couch and staring directly into my eyes with his unflinching gaze. When I went to bed, I brought him with me to close him in my room. I wanted him to know he was safe now, but he just sat on the edge of my bed and, yes, just stared at me. Except his eyes darted all over my body like he was scanning me. I fell asleep pretty fast that night. Knowing my cat was safe had a lot to do with it, even if he was a little shaken up. But then I had a nightmare. Sleep paralysis, actually. I've suffered from it before, but never this long and this vivid. I dreamed I was frozen in my bed, barely able to breathe. It felt like 100-pound weights were tied to each of my limbs. My eyesight was blurry, but I knew it was my room. The door to my room would jiggle and I could hear the tickle of keys. Tall, dark shadows would step into my room and surround my bed. It was at least 5 or 6 of them. I would begin to hear soft chanting and my body would get that sensation akin to when one of your limbs fell asleep. Then Jet would walk up my legs and stand on my chest. He would bend down to look directly into my eyes. Except they weren't green cat eyes, but blue human eyes. My eyes. The chanting would grow louder and Jet would put his mouth close to my mouth. I could feel the tickle of his whiskers on my lips. I would begin to panic as I felt my breath leave my lungs. I would try to thrash and get up, but my body would remain frozen. The corners of my vision would begin to fade from the lack of oxygen. I managed to get out one word before falling into darkness. It was a plea to anyone or anything. "Help!" I croaked breathlessly. My vision faded to black. Right before the dream ended, I heard a voice come from Jet. My voice. "Help," it mimicked. When I awoke in the morning, I was still perturbed by my bizarre and suffocating dream. Maybe that's why I began to get paranoid about my cat. As ridiculous as the notion was, I was still very shaken up. Things only got stranger from there. The dream occurred the same every night. Sometimes I could speak, sometimes I couldn't. But the dark figures would return to chant. Jet would sit atop me, stealing my breath. During the day, Jet was completely aloof and stoic. No meowing, no cuddling, not even eating treats, just staring, searching me with his eyes. On the 5th day of bad dreams, I regretted even coming home to him after work. It felt like my friend was gone, only an imposter left in his place. An imposter who used a friend's face to violate my dreams. I had delayed coming home to Jet's deadpan stares by going shopping for a few groceries after work. When I was walking to my door, I set down my groceries to fish out my keys. That's when Ella opened her door with Lil Bit on a leash. We began talking and Ella asked me if I'd found my cat. She cheered ecstatically when she heard the news he had returned. She then looked at me questioningly when she saw my dour reaction. When she asked me why I seemed sad, I froze. I didn't know what to say because I really didn't know what was going on myself. She must have saw my indecisive reaction and offered for me to come over for coffee. I gladly took it. More time out of my apartment. More and more I was beginning to like Ella. Her coffee was strong and taken dark, a neighbor after my own heart. We began chatting and I soon realized Ella was the information broker for the entire apartment complex. "Weird stuff has been going on, Laurie," Ella exclaimed over the top of her coffee mug. "First the murders, then our apartment's being broken into." I almost choked on my coffee. "What murders?" "How do you not know?" Ella asked, incredulously. "The Washingtons at 111. Maxwell killed his wife and child." "Whoa," I replied. I didn't know any appropriate reaction to news like this. "They've been here for 20 years. Max is an engineer. His wife, I think, was a teacher. Their little boy was," Ella thought, 16 now? "Did they say why he did it?" Ella scrunched her nose. "It was ghastly. In all the papers, he told the police they were imposters. Just came home and freaked out and killed them with his bare hands. They found him in the parking lot covered with blood, waiting for the cops. The poor boy and wife must have fought back because Frank was taken to the hospital for a while." I sat down my coffee. This morbid talk was making me feel worse. I had been over for about an hour anyways. I had to get back home eventually. I told Ella goodnight and she invited me to stop by anytime. When I opened my apartment door, Jet was standing on the countertop, just staring at me. I took Ella up on her offer to visit for the next couple of days. I have to admit, me and Ella were getting kinda tight. I told her all about my divorce and she told me all about how she met her third husband. Ella had her ear to the ground, knew all the tea going on. She told me another tenant had come home to find their door open and 2 ferrets missing. Ferrets? Who the hell steals ferrets? I asked her if the pet mysteriously reappeared or was brought back by the landlady. Ella told me she would have to find out. We talked about how weird the landlady Rachel was. Ella said Rachel didn't always act weird. She was always quiet and used to live off-site. Now Rachel lived in the apartments and her 2 ogre maintenance men came with her. I told Ella I hadn't been sleeping well, and in the dead of night I would look out my window onto the parking lot. Those 2 identical maintenance men were always loading things into a van. Dead body-shaped things. Ella didn't react negatively to my train of thought. She actually looked like she was enjoying the prospect of a murder mystery, so I thought I could tell her what was really bothering me. "I think something is wrong with my cat." There. It felt great to say. It felt so great that I unloaded everything. Ella just looked more intrigued, so I told her everything. How Jet's personality completely flipped. The crazy dreams, the way he watched me. Ella just nodded unjudgmentally and let my crazy flow out. I let all my worries out and I found I was out of breath at the end of my tirade. "Do you listen to Coast, Ella said flatly. "No, what's that?" "It's a radio broadcast that talks about strange things like what's going on here. It talks about UFOs, Bigfoot, purple-eyed shadows, black-eyed children, and doppelgangers." She put emphasis on the last word. "Doppelgangers," I repeated. "Ella, do you believe this stuff?" Ella cocked her head. "I would like it to be true, even the bad stuff. Even if just 1% of it is true, it would mean there is more to explore, more to discover." I almost laughed. "So you want to believe?" I asked. Ella just nodded sincerely, not getting my X-Files reference. I've experienced some unexplainable things in my life, and Frank has a terrifying story about black-eyed children. I'll have him tell it to you when he gets home." "Oh no," I said, waving my arms. "I don't need to hear that before I go to sleep." We both had a laugh and I grabbed my purse and stood up. My non-verbal cue as I was needing to go. Ella stood up with me and grabbed my hand with both of hers before I turned to leave. "Frankie's changing the locks in the apartment tomorrow. Rachel will notice if I change the lock on the front door, but screw her. I want to feel safe in my own room. And he is also installing a camera for inside." She pointed along the roof of the hallway. "If someone breaks in, we'll catch them on video. I can get Frank to do the same for you." I told Ella to price the camera and lock for me and I would think about it. I didn't know if I was fully ready to put on the tinfoil hat just yet, but at least I had options. So I slid into my apartment and fell on my couch. I kicked off my shoes and closed my eyes. But I could feel another set of eyes upon me. I opened mine to see Jet sitting atop my Xbox. So now you know my story, my paranoia, my sleep deprivation. I wondered if I fell asleep on the couch, if the nightmare would play out there. I sit up straight. I fish around in my purse to pull out a new collar with a bell on it for Jet. I was tired of him sneaking up on me. Maybe hearing him coming would let me feel a little more in control. I slid the red collar over his head. He hates it. He shakes his head furiously and paws at it, jingling all the way. "Oh, so you do show emotion," I say dryly before I turn to head to my room. Like a responsible and very tired adult, I'm in bed by 9. I fall asleep slowly. I was in the twilight between consciousness and unconsciousness when I hear it. The bell on the collar. It jingles loud and I hear an impact. The sound of the collar hitting a wall. Oh well, I think. Dummy must have just ran into a wall. But it sounded like it was thrown, like it wasn't attached to a fat cat body. Maybe I should go look. But I feel so good in my bed. Sleep is about to take me. I'm just barely awake but not recording anything. Then I hear it. A chilling sound that makes my hair stand on end. A sickly female moan. And it's close. My eyes open and my heart starts pounding. I lay frozen in bed, unwilling to move. Maybe I dreamt it. A dream you swear you hear out loud. I hear the subtle sound of my fox leather couch cushions rubbing against something. Was somebody on my couch? And I had to check, or run to Ella's. I get up and slowly walk down the hallway. I see Jet's red collar snapped in half and laying at the end of the hallway. I smell a pungent chemical smell wafting by me. I slowly make the corner to peer into the living room. What I see freezes a scream in my throat. Sitting on my couch is a naked, slim, white female with dark hair matted over her hanging head. The woman is slimy, with patches of dark fur matted in blotches all over her body. The woman looks up to stare at me with green eyes, and with my face. She stares at me unblinking. When she finally blinks, her green eyes turn to my blue eyes. I can't believe it. This is crazy. It's a dream. Oh God, please let it be a dream. Where is Jet and why does this girl look exactly like me? I refuse to think Ella was right. My double stands and looks at me. She absently brushes off the clumps of black cat fur. She stares at me, then looks down at herself. Stares at me, then down at herself, comparing my body to hers. What are you? I demand. She looks at me and copies my facial expression, an expression of terror. What are you? She repeats back to me in a low pitch. What are you? She says in a slightly higher voice. She smiles and perfectly parrots back to me. What are you? Nope. That is enough. I turn and run to my door. I reach for the doorknob when it begins to turn on its own. I hear keys jingling. It opens and two enormous maintenance men shove me back into my apartment. They stand as guardians blocking my exit. Without a word, they part and Rachel strolls between them and into my living room. What is going on? Why are they here? Help me, I beg. Help me, copies my doppelganger. From behind me, Rachel smiles and turns to nod approval at my copy. I begin backing away from all of them towards the far corner of my living room. I'm glad you matured so quickly, Laurie, Rachel chimes. Thank you, mistress, my copy replies. The copy points at the ground and says excitedly, We can use the carpet she already has here. Yes, good, Rachel replies. She turns to the twin giants and says coldly, Put her down. One of the men begins to slip tight leather gloves on, and the other pulls a thin wire out of a back pocket. They both begin to stalk towards me, their massive frames blocking any chance of running around them. I back up against my window. I turn and look out. Maybe I can jump. I start pulling on the bottom of the window. It's sealed shut. Then I see it. I almost half expected it, and all hope flees from me. The van is outside idling. My hearse is waiting for me. I feel powerful hands wrap around my neck from behind. The blood flowing to my brain is stopped. At least it will be quick. Before the life leaves me, I hear Rachel. I need you to work fast, Laurie. Only the neighbor woman. Ella's end. Laurie didn't come by for our regular coffee and chat for the past 2 days. I was already worried for the young lady with all the things she told me the last time we talked. Now I was desperately wanting to check on her. I knew when she came home from work, so I positioned myself by my door to listen for her. When I heard her keys jingling, I opened my door with Lil Bit on his leash. Oh, Glory, how have you been? No response. Laurie still had her back turned, fiddling with her keys. Glory, I sang to her. Nothing. Okay, you rude girl. Laurie, I shouted. Laurie turned to face me with a blank look. Then a fake smile spread across her face. Oh, hello, neighbor. She just turned back and slipped into her apartment, closing the door sharply. What the frick? Did I do something to make her mad? Has she gone mad? Maybe it was me going mad. I put Lil Bit down. I had been having mad thoughts lately about Bit. He had been acting different ever since I came home from choir practice yesterday. He wasn't his normal shaky self. He was quiet and still, not even wagging his tail, just like Laurie's damn cat. I just stared at him and he at me, everything rushing through my head. The whole complex was changing, all the way from the landlady to the critters. I considered what I told Laurie. Doppelgangers. Well, I got something for you if that's the case, I told Lil Bit. And I didn't mean a treat. He just sat and stared. Days passed with no contact from Laurie. Lil Bit was still acting strange, recording my every move with his eyes. I didn't have any dreams though, but 2 ambience at night may be the cause of that. It all came to a head a week later. I was taking my afternoon nap when I heard it, the jingling of keys at my bedroom door. I removed my sleep mask and looked at the door. Who's there? I shouted. I knew Frank was at work and he had the correct key to open the door anyways. There was a long quiet pause, then Laurie's voice spoke up. It's me, Ella. I need to talk. Open the door, please. I desperately started searching for my phone. I bought more time by asking, why didn't you ring the doorbell? Oh, I did. Laurie gave a fake laugh. You didn't hear it? Let's visit like we used to. I found my phone and pulled up the app that showed me the feed of my hidden camera. Thank God my Frank was paranoid and tech-savvy. I pulled up the feed showing down the hallway from my room. I gasped in terror. Laurie stood by my door with a giant ring of keys in her hand. Behind her loomed the 2 monstrous maintenance men in their tan uniforms. They were hunched forward like football players waiting for the snap. Further behind them, I could see Rachel in the living room. I squinted to make out a fifth figure in my apartment. "Oh Lord, oh no," I exclaimed. It was me. Naked as the day God made me, peeking over to look down the hallway. I was right. They were changelings, doppelgangers, mimics. Laurie quietly knocked and said something else. I didn't hear her. Grief had overtaken me. This means my friend was gone. I opened my drawer and retrieved old Roland, my .45. I slid the slide back quietly to rack around. I spoke over it to cover the telltale sound of metal on metal. "I can see you, you bitch. You're not Laurie. I can see all of you waiting to pounce me. The real Laurie knew about the camera." Fake Laurie looked up into the camera and sighed and continued in a cold voice. "We will get in, Ella. The longer it takes, the more painful it will be for you. You and Frank are the last ones. No one here will help you." Oh God. Frank was still normal. I had to get help for him. I may be lost, but maybe I could save him. If I did enough damage, caused enough commotion. There was a heavy blow to my door. Tweedledee and Tweedledum were pounding on it. They would be through in less than a minute. I canceled the app and dialed 911. I whispered my apartment address 3 times to the dispatcher and hid the phone under the bed. The top of the door caved in, and a muscled arm reached through to grab the doorknob on the other end. They will have to clear the bed to get to me. I got them stacked up. Mag holds 7 and there's 5 of them. They don't know I have a weapon though. They are cocky and overconfident. Why would a little old lady be packing heat? Maybe 2 bullets each for the big guys. Yeah, the math works out. Or maybe 1 for each and 3 for Rachel. The door busted open and the goons rushed me. I leveled the gun at the first one's head. Maybe I kill them all. Maybe the gun jams and they get me. They're all on video and the cops will come when they hear the screams regardless. But God, I pray I get to punish at least one of them. They took my friend, her cat, and might take my Frank. But this is not the worst of their sins. I scream as I squeeze the trigger. They took my dog!